My name is Rachel Sklar. I'm VP of Programming and Content at SaksWorks. And if I seem like I am in a jolly mood, it's because I love talking to Rebecca Soffer, today's guest. And even though we are talking about a somber topic, I think it is important to show that we can be joyful, happy, embrace the moment, embrace our lives. To bring it down a little bit, my association with SaksWorks is professional. My association with Rebecca is personal and also professional in the sense that I'm a contributor to Modern Loss. I'm a contributor to a book. And in order to be a contributor to Modern Loss, got to be a member of the club. So we're talking a lot about club membership today and how you can support people who are members of that club. The club, of course, is people who have been bereaved, people who have lost people who are close to them, loved ones. And Rebecca comes by her founding of Modern Loss. Honestly, she will tell you a little bit more about that, but I will tell you a bit more about Rebecca. In addition to being the founder of Modern Loss and a nationally and internationally recognized expert on bereavement, grief, and living with loss and thriving even after loss, Rebecca is also a journalist. She is a fan of the Colbert Report, so she is also very funny. This is going to be a hilarious talk. And she's also one of the most wonderful people I know I can't think of anybody with a big heart. So I'm really so happy and I feel so lucky to welcome her to SaksWorks today. Rebecca, thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom with us about this topic. And I guess I'll just let you explain your credentials if we're going to get into it.
Sure. Well, first of all, Rachel, thank you so much for having me. I'm so delighted to be speaking at SaksWorks. It is definitely like upping my cool cred in my speaking world. No, you've done such amazing programming. I'm just really lucky to be a part of it. And on a personal note, yes, I love you very much. And your contributions to Modern Loss have been invaluable. And, as you know, you wrote a piece for our first book, Modern Loss, Candid Conversation About Grief, Beginner's Welcome, which, dare I say, has sparked many, many, many conversations in the theme that you touched upon, which is code switching, which is actually a very clever segue to the talk, which is about like how you feel like you have to speak so many different languages and be so many different people when you're moving through grief, because you don't exactly know who you're dealing with and you don't exactly know like who you want to share what with at what point in time. So I am a master code switcher when it comes to living with loss. As Rachel mentioned, I was working for the Colbert Report. I was an original staff member. I was in their field production team. And when I was 30 years old, my mother was killed in a car accident during one of the show's hiatus periods. And we had just been on a family camping trip in upstate New York, our annual like camping extravaganza in the Adirondacks. My parents had driven me back to Manhattan, where I was supposed to go to work the next morning. It was Labor Day. It was 2006. And I was in my apartment just getting ready for work the next morning. And I got a phone call saying that there had been a terrible accident. And when I rushed down to the hospital in Princeton, I found out that I was now a card-carrying member of the Grief Club. It is not the club that I ever thought I wanted to be a part of by age 30 or by age never. I had already been somewhat of I'd been like a little card, like little newbie, like having lost grandparents and people who were very close to me, but who were not like maybe primary caregivers or people who I just didn't anticipate losing so suddenly and so deeply. But that was really like the night that my life was cleaved into two parts, which were the before and the after. And I was thrown into grief. I'm an only child between my parents. I had a steep learning curve But what was obvious at the onset was that grief is a total mess. It's a very lonely experience. It does not come with any sort of roadmap that is a personal guide to what will exactly help you at any moment in time. It does not come with any linear, timeline experience. That is the biggest myth of all. And, that it's still stigmatized in Western culture, that we do a really poor job of talking to each other about this and supporting each other through it. And so from that personal experience came Modern Loss, which was launched several years later, not as like my personal grief project, but as a personally charged project that I knew I could do professionally, which I co-founded with Gabby Berkner, my friend, and also in the wake of my dad's death. So I am like a double card carrying member of the Grief Club. My parents died within 4 years of each other. And here I am many years later, still working in the field of grief and still telling people who ask me if I find it morbid or morose that I'm not working with dead people. I'm working with very much living people who are breathing and trying to live really good lives. And I actually find it to be an incredibly life affirming thing that I do. So I feel really lucky to do it.
I personally have felt affirmed by you in my process. So I will share that I have been a card carrying member of the Grief Club, the club no one wants to belong to, since I was 18 years old. I had an older brother who died by suicide. This is something I wrote about in Modern Loss. I am currently in my workplace. I am sharing this in my workplace for the first time. I am not sure if my coworker knows this about me at all. I'm not sure we've talked about it, but anyhow, hi coworker, and coworkers, whoever may be watching. It doesn't come up unless it comes up. And even though I'm a professional writer, I have not, the first time I wrote about it was for Rebecca's book, for the Modern Loss book, because it's not just my bereavement, it's not just my grief, it's that of my parents, it's that of my sister. So it's everybody approaches it in their own way and with their own comfort level. The one thing that I will say is that at the outset of this call is I want to share the framing of loss that I think is so wonderful and beautiful and helpful. So anybody who's had a recent loss can hopefully find some comfort in this. It's a friend of mine, Mark Lubovich, he tweeted this in response to a thread about grief and loss, that it's like the best thing he'd heard was that it was like a giant tree that had been lost, and around the hole where the tree was, things grow and things fill it and become beautiful and grow and thrive, but you still know there's a hole, but there's still beauty around the hole. I think he wrote it in a nicer sounding way, but if there's anything that I would like to impart from my experience here is that you can thrive and be very happy and be very joyful. And I know Rebecca lives that brand every day, in addition to living the grief brand. So we're talking about the grief brand right now, and very specifically about it's like how to address this thing that we are both extremely comfortable talking about, and yet I still feel kind of awkward because I'm in my workplace. So Rebecca, what do you think companies in the United States are doing a good job right now of supporting bereaved employees? Let's just open with that.
Well, Rachel, since you teed it up like that, I do not, in fact. I think that there is an enormous growth opportunity. Let's put it that way. Let's put it kindly. Grief is like a saucy bitch, right? Like grief does not respect business hours. It doesn't respect the fact that it's just inconvenient that something triggers us when we're in the middle of a Zoom presentation, or when we're on deadline for something, or when we're about to have a meeting or a call, or just like have to have our brains work, have to have our brains function in a certain way on a certain timeline. Grief doesn't respect that, because grief is all, because it touches every single aspect of our life, right? And so I would say that when you go back to work after a loss at any point in time, it's a difficult thing because we don't do a great job in this country in general of supporting people loss. There, to this date, is no national bereavement leave policy. We came very close, but no cigar. Over the last several months, I myself have been very active in the lobbying of including bereavement leave as, job protection, bereavement leave job protections as part of the American Families Plan. As many people know on this call, that did not pass. Bereavement leave was not included. We came incredibly close to getting 3 to 5 days of paid leave guaranteed, and it did not happen. There is no specific bill right now. And the only thing that people do, if you are interested in advocating for bereavement job protections in this country, is to call your representative and share your story, share your human personal story of loss, and express to them how important it is to have these protections. Because right now in this country, if your husband dies today, or if your son gets killed in a car accident, or if your mom dies from a long-standing illness on the other side of the country, you could technically be fired if you don't show up at work tomorrow. It's sad, but it's true. And that's the way things are in this country. The goodish news is that the majority of companies in the United States do have bereavement leave policies. I think it's like 88%, maybe it's a little more right now. So it's like the majority of companies do have some sort of paid leave, but the median number of days is about 3 days. So maybe up to 5.
3 days?
3 days.
Totally fine. Out at the bars doing shots.
Right. I mean, 3 days after my mom's death, let me tell you, I couldn't even plan her funeral. Obviously, how shocking. I'm Jewish. And you're supposed to have the burial very shortly thereafter. I couldn't even do it because I was in so much shock and I felt so incredibly overwhelmed. We ended up having it several days later. So if I had to go back to work after 3 days, I wouldn't have even gotten to the point of my own mom's funeral. And so it's a problem, I think on top of that, I just want to kind of like put a little context to the state in which we're living right now. I think we're all very well aware that we're living in the throes of a pandemic. We're in year 3 of a pandemic that in the United States alone has killed on record about 854,000 people from COVID alone, okay? And just in this country, there's something called a bereavement multiplier, which suggests that for every person who dies, there are 9 people who are directly affected by that death, directly affected by that loss. So doing the math, which I did not do in my head, because that's not the way that I go. That's about 7.5 million people who are in the throes of grief from a COVID death alone, not to mention people still die every day from many other causes. There are about 200,000 kids almost in this country who have lost a primary caregiver. So when you think about all of that grief, a lot of those people who are grieving are in the workforce. Just imagine all that grief that is going on, not just, of course, in the world, like we're talking about in the United States right now. It's nearly unfathomable. Chances are that at least one person you work with is having a really hard time right now because they're grieving and they're trying to juggle, work in this Western culture that is not necessarily the most forgiving one when it comes to a very universal experience.
And it is a very universal experience. So you and I are both on the record about having suffered horrific, tragic, life-altering losses. Yet we are capable of conducting this highly professional Zoom. So surely people are able to compartmentalize, right? Tell me what I'm missing here. Another gentle softball for you.
Yeah, I think people are able to compartmentalize, some days better than others. I think that, we always talk in the modern loss community about broken brain syndrome. I think that when you're grieving, and especially in those early days, those early months, you kind of really feel like your brain is broken. you kind of have brain fog, you have trouble remembering things, you have trouble scheduling things, you have trouble remembering things that you scheduled and maybe even tattooed on your forehead because you're just kind of out of it and you're overwhelmed and you're in this stage where grief is kind of running the show. You're not really controlling how you grieve. It's kind of controlling you. So it makes it really hard to compartmentalize. And so, yes, of course, we all are capable of kind of like rising to the occasion and like the adrenaline kicks in and we can get through that meeting or whatnot. But that is only sustainable for so long. I think as human beings, I mean, like we've been in trauma mode in this pandemic for 2 years. At a certain point, we got to catch our breath. We have to practice. I don't love the term self-care because I think it's very generic. I think it can mean anything, but we have to figure out what is going to feed us and nourish us and like help us to like kind of refill our tanks so that we can keep going. And I think that when it comes to grief and our return or our continuation of our professional lives, sure, we can come back, we can compartmentalize, we can pretend it doesn't exist. But I also guarantee you that at 2 p.m. on like a Thursday afternoon, grief is going to tap you on the shoulder while you're finishing your TPS report. Did I like exceedingly date myself just now?
It's always time for an Office Space reference for sure.
That's why I love you. And just remind you that it's there in any sort of form, be it during on a death anniversary, on a Hallmark holiday, pledging to compartmentalize and just like barrel through it and use those battle metaphors, but rather to realize that like grief is something that we have to learn to pivot with because it changes all the time, right? And what we can handle changes all the time. It doesn't adhere to a set timeline. And so when it comes to work, I think as the ones who are going through the loss, we need to continually check in with ourselves to figure out like how we can how can we protect our productivity? How can we make that a little better? If we can't be productive, we can't do something, how can we talk to our managers about what might work for us? And I'm happy to give many, many specifics, but I just wanted to underscore that it's really not about like going in and sucking it up and listening to the people who will tell you that like work is a great distraction. I mean, it is sometimes, but sometimes you really need a break.
Yeah, I want to be very clear that I was being flipped before about how easy it is to compartmentalize because it's absolutely
I was aware of that.
not, and it's not. And we are talking narrow band right now of grief and bereavement from loss of a loved one, but there like the category of loss and trauma is much larger. There are people who are suffering because their loved one is ill, because they're going through the breakup of marriage, partnership, the issues at home. I mean, that there are many reasons, or even on the news. We all know that events in the world can be triggering. We're talking about a really triggering set of events right now in the form of COVID. But certainly this was like a conversation around news events like the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent trial of his murderer. And, I mean, the laundry list is not short. So
yeah, I think that's a good point, Rachel. I mean, that we've been experiencing an enormous amount of layers of societal grief, not just, someone died who I know, who I'm close with, but also the loss of different identities or the addition of multiple identities. Like maybe we're like homeschool teachers now and parents and working full time, or maybe we're caregivers or health caregivers and we're totally burned out. And yes, maybe we're reeling from, violence, acts of violence, mass shootings, acts of violence against different communities of color, different religious communities. All of this adds up and it really compounds our trauma. So yes, like I would say that in normal times, maybe I wouldn't be talking about all the different layers of the onion of all this grief, but it's very valid to talk about right now because I think that, there was this article at the very beginning of the pandemic, and I don't remember anything about it, but I remember the headline, and it was that feeling you're feeling, that's grief. If you feel it, that's grief.
And I really remember that from after September 11th actually is like recognizing the feeling from the aftermath of my brother's death. Like it was so familiar. It was shocking. And then again during COVID, recognizing that feeling again. Okay, so I don't want to dwell on the fact that it's hard. It's obviously hard. You said something though about productivity. There is a productivity expectation and there is a window professionally where that where a lapse in that productivity. I mean, it's honestly, can we just say outright like that? It's just the tying of everything in this country to productivity, from healthcare being tied to your job to go back to work after 5 days, whatever, all of this stuff. I mean, the productivity imperative is ridiculous, but this talk is supposed to be useful for people who are in a job and are bereaved, and it's supposed to be useful for people who are employing people who are bereaved, and HR departments who mediate between the two. So the idea is to be, I guess, like proactive here about the reality of what is, to take what is closer to the normative of what we would like it to be. So Rebecca, we talked a little bit about the grief fog and whatever. I mean, can we talk can you give a snapshot of that first few months after? There's obviously no timeline. There's no expectation of when you should be okay, but how does grief affect your productivity?
I mean, and it does. I think being human affects your productivity, but then you throw grief on top of it, and it's a very real thing. I mean, I think that, I'm just reading off of my notes of the things that I know very well, because I'm very tired and it's affecting my productivity. But like we say, grief brain is real. You feel like you're in this brain fog. You feel like you're having trouble concentrating, and you're having trouble kind of remembering things. I think it's really hard to go back to work or get through a work day when you're having trouble remembering things. It's almost like when you're like a toddler, and when I have a 4-year-old, so obviously he's not that old, but it was in the very recent past where I was having a conversation about how his day was so long. And at the end of the day, one day he just went completely bonkers. And I was like, what is wrong with you? And I realized that his little brain had been going all day long. It just was working so hard to get everything right and remember everything and learn everything, not messing anything up. It couldn't handle it anymore. He just let loose. He just totally melted down. And I feel in those early stages of grief, it almost feels like we're like toddlers. Our brain is working in overtime to try and stretch itself around this new reality that we're living in, this new landscape, trying to navigate what does life look like? What does tomorrow look like? What does my next year look like? What does the next hour look like? How do I get this done? And without this person who had a meaningful presence in my life, that's a lot to have on your mind, especially in the background all the time. And so it's no shock that we feel like our brains are broken, that we're not really remembering things. We don't feel really sharp. I think it's really important to remember to schedule breaks for yourself and take them. It's really, really important to do that throughout your workday, because if not, in some circumstances, on certain days, you're going to be like my 4-year-old was that day, which was an epic, utter, mental meltdown where he just needed to just be dysfunctional for a little bit. I think that you might find that you're kind of useless at work for a while. Sometimes just getting through the day and going through the motions is enough. When I said earlier that some people will say that work will save you, work is really helpful, it gives you structure. Sure. Sometimes, yeah, I definitely don't think there's one size fits all to any of these, coping mechanisms, but a lot of us still have to work, even if we are given a generous bereavement leave, we still have to work to earn money to live our lives, or we want to work, we get enjoyment out of it and meaning. But I think it's useful, I think it's very common to feel like you're useless. You're not really lending a lot in that ideas meeting or the strategy meeting or the pitch or whatever. I just want to say that from 8 years of working in modern loss and talking to thousands of community members, that is exceedingly normal. There's nothing wrong with you. So a lot of this conversation is really about to legitimize what you're feeling if you're feeling it, because it's normal. One thing about productivity is that your peak productivity hours might shift. And they might feel like they've changed because your sleep schedule might be changing, when you have the most energy might be changing, and that's also normal. And so if that happens, even for just a period of time, you might be able to see if you can change your schedule a little bit. Like maybe you take breaks at different times, maybe you can start work earlier or start work later and then end earlier or end later. I mean, there is, I would say, at least in this world of virtual, working, I do feel like there is a lot of room in the conversation with managers and companies to talk about that stuff. And so, yes, we don't have all the control in the world as grievers in the workplace. And that sucks because we should be given a lot more than we are right now. But one thing we do have is ideas that we can bring to the table. And some of those ideas are really easy to give to us. And so if you find like you need different things to help with your productivity, you should consider asking for them. So yeah, that's my productivity spiel.
Can I ask you, so there are lots of different types of workplaces. So that can be either useful or not so useful. But is that, how helpful is it? I imagine it is helpful. I'm deferring to you because you're the expert here. I imagine it is helpful if you have someone who advocate for you, a person at work who can say the things, who can make the point. Maybe you might want to give Rachel some space, right? Or, how about teaming this person up or whatever it is. Is that helpful, or is that just a well-meaning person who's potentially meddling professionally and in a way that might not be helpful?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, every work scenario is different. I know that there are a lot of people who are freelancers, who work alone, who don't have a team, who don't have colleagues, who don't have managers. And that can be extremely pressure oriented because you don't really, you're nervous to tell your clients what you're going through. You're scared you're going to be judged for it or suffer for it. So I just want to say, I understand there are so many different, working scenarios out there. If even in those scenarios, if you feel like you have any sort of comfortable relationship with anybody on your team, any manager, anybody who can be your point person, that can be a really powerful thing to have, when you're moving through like those early days and months of grief. Someone, I think people are really uncomfortable to talk about this stuff. And I also still somehow amazingly believe in the inherent good of humanity, that people generally want to be helpful. They generally want to support you, but we're really bad at talking about grief. And of course, when it comes to grief in the workplace, we might get extra awkward around our colleagues who might not want to bother us or like remind us that like our mom died, like hint, like we didn't forget, yeah. But that's a thing that we do because we don't, we're uncomfortable. We're not good at this stuff. And so it could be a supervisor or a coworker who's empathic. It doesn't have to be your best friend, but it could be somebody that you might consider asking to say, send short emails to your team members, informing people about your situation, especially in the early days, so that you don't have to send out all of these notes with details that are approved by you. Ask them to kind of run the details by you. You say fine, and then they can disseminate information on your behalf, and they can share maybe how specifically they can help you, because a lot of people do want to help, especially in those first weeks when, my mom died. I got so many edible arrangements, not from colleagues, because I think they would have only sent those ironically, but I got so many different things sent to me because people want to help. But you don't need like 50 edible arrangements. Sometimes you need somebody to just like take you out to lunch or distract you on a certain day. And so if you have this point person at work, you might be able to share with them what you think might be helpful, or if you don't want anything at all, if you don't want people getting in touch with you and bothering you for a certain period of time. I think that, it's really nice to have that point person. Again, it's somebody who you would feel like copacetic with, asking them if they can maybe figure out, like kind of be the leader and asking other colleagues to take turns at checking in on you. Maybe I know it's hard. A lot of us aren't working in person these days, but like inviting you to lunch once a week, or maybe just like a Zoom, or having a phone call, or just sending an email to just let you know that they're thinking about you. I think it's really nice to be reminded that your colleagues are human people who care, and give them tasks that don't feel overwhelming to fulfill, but make them feel like, they really are being supportive of you. We're not all therapists, we're not all grief counselors, but we all have a deep capacity for empathy. And I think that if we care about a colleague who is going through a loss, we can easily be there for them, by checking in on them, by sending something that might be meaningful, by laying off them on trigger days. I think another thing that is helpful is, telling your point person to feel free to tell people that you really don't want to talk about your situation. I think that sometimes it's helpful in the workplace to share what you're going through. Sometimes you feel like it, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just want to focus and you want to maybe grasp on to whatever normalcy you recognize, which might be writing your TPS report or doing a pitch or whatever. That might be like like a link to your sanity sometimes. And so that person could share like, hey, listen, just like, let them do their thing. Like, let them do their thing. They just want to go about their business. And that's fine. But I think a lot of us are left wondering like what we should say and what we shouldn't say to people when they're grieving. And like having a point person can be really helpful. And then, I just think it's just nice to have somebody who you can confide in. Work is hard. Working during a pandemic is hard. Working during a pandemic when you're grieving is really hard. It's nice to feel like there's somebody in your workplace who you can kind of be real with, and I understand that not all of us have that person, but I also understand that a lot of people really do want to be helpful, and it might be worth giving somebody a chance to be that person.
Rebecca, so I see we have at least one member of clergy in attendance here. Is there value to deputizing people from outside your workplace and people who have a sort of moral authority, your cantor, your rabbi, your priest, your whoever your religious leader is of your community is to, as I like to write a letter, to reach out privately? Is that done? I was effective. I was 18, but I was a kid, right? When my brother died, I had a lot of structure because I still had school, and then I had camp, and then I went away to university, which was where I, majored in code switching, but
Right.
that was useful for me. But so I was a kid. I didn't shoulder the responsibility. So while there was presence of clergy in our home, I don't actually know what they may or may not have functionally done for my parents. Mental note: I will ask them. I'm sure they're not watching this, but they might be. How can we deputize the people in our communities to support us professionally, and is that appropriate?
I mean, I would say that I don't know, when it comes to like grieving at work, if companies should engage with clergy members to have on board as support. I think it depends on the organization. If it's a secular organization, I would say that the best thing to do is, I think there's a lot that companies can do, a lot. And I'd love to go into that. But I think one of the things that companies can do to support employees is to set up mental health support, and to have that as a benefit that exists no matter what at any point in time, to create affinity groups, to create mental health wellness groups, to create, different parenting groups that, so that, if you are grieving, like you can join one of these groups to feel like you're talking about it with an empathic crowd, and a crowd that can, kind of help you through it through their own learned expertise. Grief counseling access, having grief counselors on board, whenever a loss happens, so that HR doesn't have to go scrambling to find them, is an invaluable tool. So I guess that I would say for companies, I wouldn't necessarily think of clergy members, although they do incredible work. I'm just saying that you never know what anybody's credence is. So I would go for more of like a grief counseling type of option. Of course, in our personal lives, absolutely. I mean, I'm kind of like a wellness omnivore. Like if there's, a Hindu priest that is doing something that sounds fascinating to me, great. Like I want to learn about it. If there's a minister that is, I love Kate Bowler. She's phenomenal. She has the podcast, Everything Happens. I've learned so much from her. And of course, I'm a Jewess, and I do a lot of stuff in the Jewish world. And I have many, many rabbi friends who have taught me so much about grief and loss. But to answer that specific question about the workplace, I would say, yeah, having grief counselors, go-to grief counselors is great. I can't tell you the number of times people have contacted me from companies over the years saying one of our employees died, or this happened. The last one was a company that was in Washington, D.C., and somebody took their own life, and they were scrambling to find grief. Can you help me find somebody who can speak to my employees? And it's like, that's amazing that they wanted to help their employees, and I connected them with the right person. But what if you had that person already? What if you had them as a benefit? What if you had that as a service so you don't have to scramble, knowing that loss happens every single day? It's a nice thing to plan for.
So, so are there, is there like a sort of a set of principles and like guidelines that employers and companies can avail themselves of? It kind of sounds like they're like, this is like an enterprise software solution potential. Like if there's one thing, you do know that any group of people over time will eventually, there will eventually be some sort of loss that will eventually touch that group. So is this something that like our companies, is it just there for them to grab and do, especially now, or should everybody be reinventing this wheel? Kind of sounds like not.
I think that there are certain things that every company should consider doing right now. If there are any HR people watching this, I absolutely think, and I think that they're kind of attainable. Some of them are free to do. They're just like, they involve treating your employees with respect and not patronizing them and making things worse during an incredibly vulnerable and insulting time in their lives. So first of all, like I said, a lot of businesses in the US offer paid leave, but the median number of days is 3. So I would say that, of course, there are outliers. Facebook, of course, Sheryl Sandberg, very famously of Option B. There are different organizations that do offer an enormous amount of paid leave, but most do not. So consider at the very least including 5 days of paid job protections for bereavement leave, but also appreciating that each person needs things at different times. When my dad died, I knew, because my mom had already died, I was kind of like, here we go again. And I remember thinking, okay, I don't want like a month off right now. I want to take like a week off or 2 weeks off right now so that I can do all of the things, the logistical things. And then I want, in like 5 or 6 months, I want to take a month. I don't care if it's paid or unpaid, but I want them to save my job for me. And I want to go deal with all of my dad's stuff. And I need to put his house on the market, and I need to do all this stuff. And I knew that I was going to have to do that. And I was so stressed thinking about having to do it like on the weekend, because I lived in New York City and my dad was in Philly, and just like how exhausting that was going to be and how impossible, really. And I went to my employer and I said, I'm going to need this. Will you work with me, please? And they did, to an extent. And I didn't get everything I wanted, but actually got a lot of it. And it really just came from advocating for myself, because they didn't think to offer it to me. And so I think it really behooves organizations to remember that grief is not a set timeline. And it's certainly depending on the person, depending on the type of loss, whether it was a sudden loss, a traumatic loss, there might be different logistical things that have to be taken care of at different times. There might be kids in the mix. There might be therapy sessions that have to be gone to. There might be scheduling flexibility that needs to be had. I think that just knowing that and making it clear in your bereavement policy that you as an organization are open to that is really important. And making it clear that your organization has an open door policy for employees to come in and talk to their managers about what their needs are, that you are willing to listen and work with them. It just engenders so much trust. And especially during a time when, let's be honest, we're being told by the CDC that it's okay to go back to work 5 days after being diagnosed with COVID. It doesn't really feel like, we live in a country where productivity is not number one, right? Because we do. So if you're an organization, consider maybe reminding your employees that you know they're human beings and putting your money where your mouth is. I think that another thing is just trust your employees, treat them with respect. I can't even tell you how many times I have heard from people that they were asked for a death certificate to prove that somebody had died so that they could take their bereavement leave. I was not asked for that. I mean, my mom's obituary, right? It was pretty self-evident that my mom had died. And also I worked with people who did not question it. But a lot of companies ask for that stuff. And I can't even imagine who would like try and game the system to get 3 days of bereavement leave. Like that would be weird. I mean, I know that, in 80s comedies, we always, hear the excuse like, oh, my aunt died or my great aunt died as like an excuse to get out of a date or whatever. I'm just like remembering like a Friends episode from the 90s. But I don't think people really do that. So why do you need to ask them for a death certificate? And the reason I bring it up is because it's actually a thing. It happens a lot more than you think it does. It does. Another thing, like I said, setting up mental health support as benefits. Maybe like Modern Loss runs a community. We have an online community where we offer every single month, we offer yoga for grief support and mindfulness sessions and sessions with authors and different experts in their fields related to grief.
And in the before times, some truly spectacular live shows.
Really great live shows.
I mean,
oh
fantastic.
gosh, I hope we get back to those. And yeah, so like I think that there's a lot that companies can do, and I think that like that's at the macro level, and I think at the micro level, as a manager, or a coworker, just be a human. Like remember that you never know what somebody else is going through, even if they look like they completely have their act together. Remember that this could be you in a second. This could be you tomorrow. Some of the best, most empathic managers, I think, are the ones who know who've been there, who have experienced adversity, who've experienced loss, not just death loss, really, but any type of real adverse situations. And I think the key is really just having empathy. And if you really can't understand what it feels like to have your partner die or have a miscarriage or a stillbirth, and you need a report from that person, or you need them to hit certain numbers, maybe think about like the worst thing that has ever happened to you and how that made you feel, how that made you feel scared or uncertain or not sure of what tomorrow was going to look like, or even what like 2 p.m. was going to look like. And that is empathy. Like that's an empathy trick that you can do to kind of really feel what it must feel like to feel that scared and that vulnerable and that overwhelmed. And I think we're all capable of doing that. And when we do that, I think it's a lot easier to be kinder and more understanding and give a little bit more to people with whom we might not ordinarily see eye to eye. I want to like share one little anecdote. There was a member of our Modern Loss community a few years ago. We have a closed Facebook group, and there was a woman who said, we have this manager and like literally nobody likes him. He was never my person. And his wife died of cancer last week. And she was just sharing the story. And she said, I left him a copy. I didn't know what to do for him. And everybody was saying like, nobody liked him. So they were just saying like, sorry for your loss, which, okay, like, thank you, but doesn't go very, very far. And she said, I kind of just left him a copy of Modern Loss book. It could be any book, by the way. It just happened to be the Modern Loss book on his desk with a note, because her dad had been murdered the previous year in a home invasion. And she said that he called her that night and they had this long conversation. And she wrote in this note saying like, this guy was never my person. And now he's one of my people. And it's just this inherent understanding that you're willing to cut somebody some slack and give them a little more understanding because you have an idea of what they're going through. And it's so powerful. And in a world where we're having so much division and so much strife and so much hopelessness, I mean, really, it's freaking hard right now. This is very powerful. This is what we have. Like, this is the way that we can pull each other in. This isn't political. This is human. And we should use the opportunity. I do want to say, if it's okay, I know we'll run out of time and we probably want to get to questions. But
I just was wanted to let people
yeah.
know you can start putting your questions if you have them in the Q&A, and we will get to them. And you can also find Rebecca on social media, and SaksWorks on social media. We'll say all of that at the end. I don't want to cut Rebecca off, especially when she's being so amazing, and I love you. But please start with your questions, and we still have to get to your books, plural. So
those things.
yeah. Okay,
no,
go on.
the things that I wanted to say is like, I just wanted to share a couple more things. Like, obviously I just went on a total spiel about what companies could do better, because there's so much that they can do better. But I also want to remind people that they have agency. Like, you have agency. You know, I'm going to quote Ruth Ann Harnish right now. You know, Ruth Ann. Ruth Ann
We
is
love
this
Ruth Ann.
phenomenal. I adore her. She's one of my mentors. She's this phenomenal philanthropist, supports lots of women-led organizations and initiatives. And she taught me very well. She's like, I can't stand when people say, empower yourself. And I'm like, why? And she's like, because you already have power. Like, where you don't have to empower yourself. It's there. Just use it. And I remembered that clicking. I'm like, you're right. Like, I'm not like getting power. I'm not like plugging myself in, or like, I'm not like touching anything magical. I'm not like what Mirabel in Encanto, touching the door. You wanted me to reference Encanto.
I did, and I was going.
I
came so close to mentioning surface pressure before. It's like anybody who's seen Encanto.
But I got you this way.
You did. You absolutely did.
Ad-libbing at that.
We are going to talk about Bruno. Okay, sorry.
Right.
I'm sorry.
So you know, like we aren't like Mirabel, like we're touching the door and like suddenly getting our special talent where we can like talk to animals. I can totally talk to my dog though, as an aside. She has a Southern accent in my mind, but we have the power. We have agency. We just have to use it. And so if your company is not meeting your needs, you have literally nothing to lose by asking and stating your needs. And your needs are going to change over time when you're grieving, just like your needs are going to change, like just by virtue of being human. But you know, you might want to consider some of these things. And like, I write about them in the book, and I feel really strongly about them because they really help me personally. You might want to think about, for a certain period of time, you know, I know it kind of applies to everybody right now, but do you want to work from home for a bit? Some people are being asked to go into the office. A lot of my friends are, actually, especially the friends in finance in the city. But would it help you to work from home for a period of time or a few days a week? Is it possible for you to maybe start out part-time for a little bit and ease back into a full-time schedule, even just for a couple of weeks, so that you kind of have ample downtime to come back, or like fold in some of the logistical things? You might need to find a car or transfer a deed or find a new place to live. It's not just about planning a funeral, you know? Or do you maybe want to start out by taking some 3-day weekends so that you don't completely exhaust your broken brain after 5 days of work, you know, right after a loss? Would you like a flexible work schedule so that maybe you can get some grief counseling or do other things that aren't possible outside of business hours? I know that therapists are available on Zoom right now, kind of at any time of the day. But when my mom died, I had to go. I mean, I was working for a daily TV show, so it was not, you know, it wasn't the easiest thing to like go to therapy once a week at 4 p.m. when the show was in rehearsal. And I had to ask for it because my grief counselor did not have hours at 9 p.m. at night when I could go see her. And I was nervous too, but they said, yes, do what you need to do. And I realized, like, the worst they can say is no. So ask. They're not going to fire you for asking. And if they do, that's the whole other conversation, girl.
This is the point though, where we acknowledge that if you're going to have a boss at a time of bereavement, you could do worse than having a boss like Stephen Colbert, who is deeply acquainted as a club member, a longtime club member, and has been
he knows what's up.
Yeah,
he knows what's up. He does. And you know, and so I'll just end the last thing. You know, a lot of us are in performative jobs. A lot of us do public speaking. A lot of us are in education, or, you know, our professors, or, you know, do lectures or whatnot, or our doctors, or, you know, just, we have to be front facing. Is there maybe a way that you can ask to do maybe like reduce your course load for a semester or part of a semester, maybe take on more office hours, take on more committee work or background work for a period of time so that you don't feel like you're front and center. It may not always be possible, but it might actually be very possible in certain scenarios. And also I think that it's also worth asking, and I never thought of asking this when my mom died, but I've learned from a lot of people that it's worth asking if maybe your technical performance period that is being considered you might get like a pass on a certain part of that. Like when you get your annual review, can we please not count like January through April because my dad died in December? Can you give me some time where you're not using these metrics as like a measure of how great I am as an employee? Because I'm really just a human being. And I think that's like a really important thing to ask, and something, again, I never thought of asking when I was going through it in those early days. So, those are the things I really wanted to share, because like I really think that they're helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is also important for anyone in this experience, having this experience on either side, on the management side, on the employee side, whoever is experiencing it, there are resources. So I think the biggest mistake someone can make is just assuming that they know best immediately from the outset. It is irresponsible for a manager to not do some research and look to precedent and look to what's being done well and right. Just to think that you know how it is and not ask experts because they're there and want to help. And there's unfortunately, we are in a time when there is plenty online on this topic. What a segue. There are also books to purchase that provide a measure of understanding, comfort, and guidance and clarity. One of them is the Modern Loss Handbook, right? Candid Conversations About Grief, Beginner's Welcome.
Well, you just merged them, which is amazing.
I did. Okay. Well, it's got
and now I feel now I feel less prolific because it could just be one book, I guess.
No. It's never. Can I do this? Right. Modern Loss, Candid Conversations About Grief, Beginner's Welcome. And I have an essay in here. Here, I'm going to just be there. Look at that. Look at that adorable book.
There she is. She's so cute. That's my first book, which I co-wrote with Gabby and 40 amazing contributors. And that came out 4 years ago in this weekend, 4 years ago this weekend, which is crazy. So happy book birthday to that little baby. And I do have another book coming out. Yes, it's called The Modern Loss Handbook. And if you can't read Rachel's iPhone screen, it is, the subtitle is An Interactive Guide to Moving Through Grief and Building Your Resilience. Because I like to think that I'm somebody who puts my words where my other words are, which is, I say that there are all these things that you can do, and I'm showing you some of them in this book. It is not a you must do this type of book, and it's not a journal. It's not like what's coming up for you as you look at this sunset. It's an actual book. It's 50,000 words, but it has different sections that aim to help you do 3 things, which are so important when we live with loss, which are to stay connected to your person. And sometimes your person might be your pet, you never know. To stay connected with yourself, to kind of figure out like how to get better sleep, how to treat your body well, how to listen to your body when grief affects it, how to do different exercises, mindfulness exercises, breathing exercises, tapping exercises, how to get different therapies for yourself, and stay connected to the world around you. Because grief is all, it affects our friendships, it affects our romantic relationships, it affects our work experience and the decisions that we make. And I think that when you manage to achieve those 3 goals, then you really are kind of you're creating meaning out of your loss, and not talking about like creating modern loss or running like a marathon in someone's memory. I mean, real meaning with your life, living a life that has meaning and richness because you deserve it. Just because you live with loss doesn't mean you don't deserve to live as richly as possible and with joy wherever you can find it. because it's going to be messy, I guarantee you, no matter what. But if you allow it to, there's a lot of room for a lot of lightness to come in. You just have to be open to it. And sometimes you actually have to seek it out. So this book really addresses all of that stuff. And I'm really proud of it. I wrote it with very little childcare and during the depths of last winter, and it was intense. It's out in May, coming out in May.
Well, we will be sure to I think the links are in the chat, and we will be sure to share it for now until May. But really what you've circled back to where we started, which is this conversation and modern loss, and the whole point of this is that this is for people who are still here. It's for the living, to help them live with joy and meaning. And it's, kind of a lofty goal for SaksWorks, but that's what we are here for. This is exactly the kind of conversation that we should be having, especially in this moment. All right, I'm going to look at the Q&A right now, and see what our questions are, and then I think we should be able to come in just under the wire. We have a question to those who check in with us who are grieving. How do you tell them that you don't want to talk about it, but not make them feel bad for asking?
To those of us,
for if we are grieving and someone just wants to check in, like, how are you doing? How are you feeling?
Yeah.
So is it terrible? Are you crying every day? Are you crying yourself to sleep at night? Whatever it is. Some people they really want to dive in when you just maybe don't really want them to. How do you tell them to peace out without saying it in another way?
You say thanks. You say thank you for your concern. I really don't feel like talking about it right now, but I really appreciate your concern. I really appreciate you checked in. You figure out a way to be kindly direct, and you nip it in the bud. That is my very best advice, because it took me many years to figure out how to just say, I don't really feel like talking about it right now, but I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Like, I appreciate that. It's okay. That's not insulting.
And then you can be like,
and you're probably letting the other person off the hook. The person's probably going to be like, okay, whew. And then you'll appreciate that they offered, even if in maybe an annoying way, and they'll appreciate that they offered and that you responded. I think the worst thing that people can do is pretend like nothing happened. So you got to give them kudos for trying.
I was going to say, on the flip side of that is it often takes a lot of like planning, evaluation, thinking, sweating, like flop sweat, like, okay, I'm going to ask, I'm going to say something. Yeah. So it is a good thing that people express that concern. And it is also completely valid to say, I'm not up for it right now. And then you have the perfect segue into another topic, because then you can just say, have you seen Encanto? Those songs are really catchy, right?
I am big at the art of the redirect, by the way. That's like my jam. So yeah, I'm very good at non sequiturs. So that's a very good, and another tip is if somebody is asking you for like insidious details that are really none of their freaking business, and that will happen at work, because people can sometimes suck. Let's just put it like that. Sometimes they know when they're being,
not have good judgment and not respect boundaries. How about that?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. It can be a range of, like, I don't think anybody's out to get you, but sometimes I think people can be just the literal definition of thoughtless, before they ask you something. And if they're asking you for details like, oh, was she wearing a seatbelt? I got that one a lot. And yep, the answer was, yep, she was. Were they a smoker? Were there signs? Did you have any sense for if they were done? Like, these are things that people ask. You are most welcome to respond by saying, why do you ask? Very kindly. And I guarantee you that is probably going to put an end to that exchange. Because unless they have a reason that like is incredibly inherent to their immediate survival as a person, they probably don't need to be asking you that question and needing that answer. So asking them why you're asking in a really nice way. And it's like, oh, why do you ask? Put it back on them. And I guarantee you that's going to shut that conversation down. And I use that a lot.
Oh my God. Well, Rebecca, you are, I mean, yeah, that takes a spine. I was searching for another body part. In any case, we have one more question. I want to address it. I hope that person is still on the call. How do you ask for help when you don't know what you want or need?
Yeah.
That's it right there, right?
Yeah.
And I can offer one thing, which as a person who wants to help, what not to do is just say, just let me know what you need. Don't put it on them. So Rebecca, I will lob this to you, obviously. How do you ask for help when you don't know what you want or need?
Yeah, I think that's a question that people ask every single day. Like you feel like you need somebody to care, but you don't know what kind of care you need. And I think that it's, if you're lucky to have even just a couple of people in your life that you can share this with, say to them that, like, I feel like I need help. I don't actually know what I need, but I know I need somebody to check in on me. And so could you just check in on me every day? Because maybe tomorrow I'll know what I need tomorrow. And maybe on Saturday, I'll know what I need on Saturday. Even if I don't know for the next 5 days, maybe I'll know next week. Can you just keep checking in on me, please? Because eventually I think I'm going to have an answer. And in the meantime, you're going to know that people are checking in on you. You'll know that they're remembering you. Like I remember that there was a time once where like my friend kept asking me to go to dinner. Do you want to go to dinner? Do you want to go to? And I didn't like for like weeks on. I'm like, I don't. Thank you. And then she finally said, okay, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I'm bothering you after like the third week. And I was like, I love it. Thank you so much. Like, I'm not going to never want to go to dinner. Like eventually I think I'm going to want to go out to dinner. I just don't want to do it now, but it means so much that you're offering. Like, I think it would feel so much crappier if you weren't.
That is wonderful, generous advice. And I hope that's been helpful. Rebecca, you're amazing. Thank you so much for this conversation. You're always candid conversations about grief and loss, but also living, thriving, being joyful, and going out for dinner. Because if there's one person who really loves to go out for dinner, I feel bad because I'm that person who's always like, I don't think I can come for dinner, but you always ask. And we will do so soon.
I do always ask you. I always ask if you want to go to dinner.
So lame.
You always say no.
I just haven't really wanted to go and do very many things during this pandemic, even when it's like outside or whatever. And then I got this job, which is literally in a like leading community, which this is a good segue into describing SaksWorks, which I did not do at the outset. So for those of you who stuck around, thank you. We are a membership club, a new community. We launched in September. It's an interesting time to have launched an IRL meeting space, but we're trying to make it happen because it's a really beautiful space. We got plants everywhere and amazing wellness programming, health and wellness, and wellness for the brain. If I do say so myself, our programming is pretty great and pretty on point with people like Rebecca. Please visit us at SaksWorks.com. You just go to SaksWorks.com. You will automatically get offered a complimentary day pass. And when you are comfortable, and when it is right for you, you will come in, you will visit us, and you will see what we mean. And I would love to welcome you for a nice conversation by the plants, or
oxygen.
Yeah, exactly, or whatever you want, whatever you're comfortable with, which I think is a nice takeaway from this. Whatever you're comfortable with, whatever is serving you, and whatever is keeping you connected to your loved one, yourself, and your community, because that's life. And life is more than work. But since we also have work and life, then it's good to have strategies. Rebecca, anything else?
Thank you. No, I just want to thank you so much for having me at SaksWorks. I'm thrilled to be here in my own home at SaksWorks. Hopefully I will be there IRL one day.
For your book launch in May.
Yeah, right. And let's pray for global supply chain issues to resolve so that my book can get off the shipping crate. But if there are any companies out there, if you're watching this and feel like your company would benefit from a conversation about grief in the workplace and different tactics, either if you're an HR professional or if you're an employee, please reach out to me, because I love doing that. I love working with companies and helping them to help each other better. I'm on the internet, so I'm out there in the ether. Come say hi.
I can't wait to say hi to you in person, even though I know you're on the internet in the ether. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Stay in touch, and we've been posting. We have been tweeting fairly frequently with everybody's handles about this event. So you can find Rebecca's handles and information on the SaksWorks Twitter and on the SaksWorks Instagram. On Twitter, it's Saks_works. And again, please visit the website, get your complimentary day pass, and we will see you IRL, and we will see you, Rebecca, in May IRL for your book party.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Be well and take care of yourself.